Hello, and welcome to the video commentary for Goblin, Issue 8B. I am Solomon Mars, creator of Goblin, Volume 1 of the 555 Saga. Let's see. I don't know, I just love the intense red color of this cover. I really don't know what else to say about it other than that. I just like the way it looks. It's just intense. I don't think I've ever used red up to this point, and it just pops. Not a lot. There's really no meaning behind there's no meaning behind the Halo-esque incantations behind / around Jeff's head or his hand, other than it's just kind of what it is, just incantations hovering around his head, hovering around his hand. Yeah, I just needed something visually interesting, visually striking, and I think this just kind of, I think it worked. Definitely. So we start reconnect. The wonderful thing about this whole underground area below the sort of the guts town area of the Red Castle was that it was supposed to have a lot of ruins in it, where there were almost saying that they were temple ruins is wrong, because obviously they weren't temple ruins if it's not a temple, but sort of monuments that existed down there, arches and things like that, constructions for certain areas that had collapsed and stuff, and so they looked like ruins. Everything. I love this though, that little steam-powered elevator. It's great. I wanted there to seem like there was tension. Definitely in the there's tension in the air. You knew something was wrong with Jeff, now that he was in this situation, presented with his grandmother. Something was wrong. And, I actually added this scene after I was finished with the book. I went back and I looked, and I didn't like the transitions of the scenes, and I thought there needed to be at least one scene showing what they could see. So I went over the shoulder of all of them, showing out over the open area, and I think it turned out really nice. I like that view, and it's funny to think that it wouldn't have happened unless I had looked through the book one last time before I uploaded it and looked and said, you know what, this book needs something. Yes. Now, I'll admit, the entire meeting of the Rock Eater between Jeff and Amy was written. It was actually written a long time ago. It was written at some point after after the original Goblin was conceived and then sat to the side, and something I actually I mentioned in an earlier commentary, Goblin had spun off into all these other series that were conceived at the same time. Only a few. There were about 3 different series conceived at the exact same time, and so each of them was, they were, giving little pieces of themselves to one another, cross-pollinating constantly. And one of the other series that it cross-pollinated with Goblin, I started working on that. And so I wrote this entire Rock Eater sequence, but at the time I was convinced that I wanted to write write the story not as a comic book anymore, but as a novel. And so I just filled notebooks with this entire novel, the story. And one of the sequences was called, one of the chapters was called The Rock Eater. And it was the two main characters, meeting this older woman. And it was just the way the problem with it is the entire sequence, where they take the boat ride through. They didn't meet the bandits, and then they take the elevator up. The elevator was altered. It was different. The way the elevator worked in the story is really different and hard. It would be very hard to depict in just comic form. Animation, it would be easier to depict, but in comics, it would be hard to understand why it's significant at all. So I changed it to a steam-powered elevator like this. But the way that everything was described, I imagined, honestly, the entire room darker. It was lit by, it was almost candlelight, so it was supposed to have more of a orange glow, a sort of brown-orange sort of glow to it. And when it came time to actually do the comic, when I had, years later, taken that story and reapplied it to Goblin, things had changed. It wasn't this dark room anymore. It was this brightly lit room, and it was just interesting to see it kind of morph that way. But the hallways were just lined with all these statues that the Rock Eater had actually constructed over time, and just depictions of people that she had met through her travels, and depictions of ancient heroes of myth and lore, and just different things, and some of them were supposed to be in the middle of being constructed, and you could see the lines, the marker lines, so that she knew where to cut, to cut away to make the sculpt more rounded or whatever. I'm sorry, I don't really know a lot of like sculpting terminology, so forgive me. But yeah, I still wanted to try to get that across, that these sculptures were actually really they were really magnificent for these characters. They may look kind of weird to us because the way that I depicted them, the detailing isn't fine detailing, but that's really my way of making it look less realistic. Like if I put full detail into them, it would look like just people, because it's it's illustrated. They would look just like people, and so I had to pull back on some of the details and some of the lines so that you can tell that they're more rock. They're more of a rock surface, because I just in my mind, using textures is not enough. Yeah. And by this point, I believe I actually had I think I got my I think I was using CS3 again. So I had my texture packs back, and I don't know if you can tell, I just went nuts. I went nuts. And that's the thing, like, her room is constructed almost completely out of the same material that she works from, and it wasn't supposed to be like that in the beginning. In the original form, it wasn't like that. Like, she just had a normal clay room. But I thought, oh well, I mean, maybe she has a particular material that she likes to work with and she surrounds herself with. But yeah, I definitely wanted her to come off as not really mean, but very what's the term? I can't even think of the proper term. She's not mean, and she's not really unfriendly. She's not really cautious either. She just isn't very, she doesn't warm up to people easily, and she keeps to herself a lot. So, yeah. But we're talking about Jeff, who is her, that's a grandson, and this girl that's traveling with him. So, she can't be all that bad. She seems nice. So she's not, she's a little, she doesn't know what their situation is right now, why they're here and stuff. But, hey, she's willing to let them in. I really hate some of the morphing that Reduha goes through in this. I mean, even the Rock Eater goes through a little bit of morphing, but Reduha goes through a lot. Even though I had his character design already done, it just, I don't know, I didn't, it took a while for me to get a grasp on the actual design that I had created for him. It happens. It took a while for me to get a grasp on Jeff's design. I had to draw the comic a few times before I really got a good grasp on it and was able to draw him based on the original design easily. Which is why, I highly encourage anyone that wants to, get into doing comics, but you want to refine your designs and get your characters perfect and all this stuff, don't wait. Just do it. Just do it, because it's easier to practice while you actually work. Put out issues. Go ahead. Everyone understands that artists grow, especially other artists, And so, if people won't look at your work as terrible if you're putting out something that you put your heart into, and then they will notice that you're evolving over time, and when you reach a point that you feel very comfortable with, you will have already it will be because you have been essentially practicing all that time through actually working, doing comics, But I definitely don't think anyone should wait until they've reached a point that they feel where they feel that their art is perfect, or they've finalized their designs. Because, in all honesty, there is no perfection. There is no final design. You will never be satisfied with your art. As an artist, it's a truth. It's a truth. You can ask any quote unquote master artist, and they will tell you that no, they're never satisfied. They're always pushing to be better than they are at that time, always wanting to be better, and that's just the nature of the artist. We're never satisfied, and so. While at the time I looked at Reduha and I said, yes, okay, this is awesome. I looked at the character turnarounds for him that I had designed, and I went, oh, no, this doesn't look like those. But I couldn't not produce the book just because he didn't look exactly how I wanted him to. I mean, he's still Reduha in essence. So I had to just keep going, and I knew eventually I would get to that point. Eventually. I wanted her workroom to be her workshop. I wanted it to be a little bit smaller. It was more claustrophobic. And I don't know. I actually I regret leaving one sequence out, but. At least in this part, but it actually does show up during the mini arc, the Golden Runes mini arc. It's going to show up there, which hasn't actually come out as of this recording. But whatever. There was one little thing in here that would have worked as far as explaining what the Rock Eater could do and why she was called the Rock Eater and stuff like that. And it was subtle. It was very subtle, you know, a very simple explanation. But, yeah. I mean, you know, just talking about she's a master sculptor. And that's the thing, she's traveled all over the world and just done stuff, seen things. She's been a teacher, she's been a student, she's been an observer. But she's this master sculptor that people they want her services, and she denies it, you know, because she stays at the Red Castle, and she helps the people there, you know, these people that have no other place to go. Jeff just looks so upset and just walks off. And there's supposed to actually be a silk cloth hanging from the ceilings, kind of hanging from the ceilings in sort of arcs, and I couldn't figure out how to actually depict it, how to actually execute that. I'm sure I could have tried with the lasso tool to just use that and create something, but in the end, I thought it would look too strange, it would stick out too much, and it wasn't really necessary to show that specific detail. When you're writing, like in a novel form, it was fine because one of the characters is looking around the room and, you know, noticing all this detail and stuff. But for a book, in a comic book, it's not necessary to fill every single page with that much detail. Sometimes it can be overwhelming, and it really would have been. So I'm glad I decided against it. I think that the Rock Eater, I changed her design slightly over the course of only a few issues. Excuse me. And I'm actually glad I did. She's a little bit more rabbit-like at the end of 8A, and then even less rabbit-like in 8B. And she becomes more of sort of just a rabbit-esque type of character as the series goes on. And it's just kind of what worked naturally for my hand over time. I was just kind of playing with shapes and just realizing that I couldn't give her that same long rabbit face and stuff. And I needed to refine her design so she was more streamlined, which was more like her character. She's more streamlined. She's very, she's lanky. She's a really tall character. She's towering. And sort of giving her sort of a intimidating, powerful look, very streamlined, and and I wanted her movements to seem not really graceful, but very imposing. Like just stretching out her arm would be just this striking pose, because of her shape and her size, so I wanted to get her face lined up with the rest of her body as well. So things kind of morphed a little and changed for honestly, I think the better. Yeah. I don't know, there's something about that little the little blanket thing hanging over the back of the sofa there. I like the way that it looks. I don't know. It's a very simple thing, but I like the way it looks. It was actually completely created in Photoshop, and just kind of put on that on the layer underneath Amy. But it looks interesting. I mean, it sticks out a little bit, but I don't know. I think it sticks out in a really nice way. It somehow still blends into the picture. I love how Mumu is so concerned and he's looking down there. Yeah. There's not a lot to say about these few pages here. I like Amy's pose there. She's sort of standing, you know, in a relaxed position with her hip sort of cocked to one side, leaning on the back of the couch. These are just sort of transition. I actually have that ring that's on the Rock Eater's pinky. I have one of those, or, well, now that I think about it, I don't have it anymore. Wow. Yeah, I just realized I don't have that anymore. Wow. I used to have it then. Actually, I used to have that, the one that's on her ring finger as well. You know, common rings. But they were nice at the time. No real reason to have them, just interesting rings. I don't even wear rings anymore, but whatever. And that was something I was very inconsistent with. The rings on her fingers and the bracelets on her arms. The bracelets on her arms are understandable because her sleeves sometimes cover those up. But the rings on her fingers, I was very inconsistent with. So sometimes you see them and sometimes you don't. But they're supposed to always be there. But yeah, she definitely looks more rabbit-like here than in later depictions. This is one of my favorite parts of this issue, is the whole conversation between Jeff and Frez. Frez owns the local slug hut, and this is the kind of place that Jeff was looking for in way back in issue 3, when he came into Dunburst. He was looking for a slug hut, and really it's just a place where a slugger, you know, a bounty hunter would go to find out the latest news about everything pertaining to their world, the world of bounty hunters, you know, sluggers, I should say. I'm really sad that I didn't put more effort into the details that are in there. I mean, look at the table; it's just empty. The walls, the posters on the walls are empty, and it's just I don't know. I was just kind of like, when I was working on it, I just didn't feel like putting any detail in there, and I don't know why I didn't go back later and just put details in there while I was coloring. But when I drew it, I just didn't care enough, and I'm really upset at that, because it's the first time that you actually get to see this world, a real significant part of this world that that Jeff is supposed to be a part of, and is never really shown. You've never really seen Jeff slug. You've never actually seen him go after, you know, actually do his job. We've only seen him just kind of out randomly in the world, and this is the first time that he technically is in his work environment. And I don't know, I think the depiction was just very lackluster. It's funny though, this is actually based on this entire facility is based on a check cashing place that I would go to a lot when I was like transitioning between banks. I left one bank and went to another, and for a little while I just did not trust banks or their security. With my old bank, someone had actually gotten access to my account and went on a spending spree, and so I came away from banks just not trusting them at all. And so I took all my checks and I cashed them, and I kept the money in my place, in various places in my home, which is that seems like something an old man would do, but I know plenty of people that don't have bank accounts now. But this is what the actual check cashing place looked like, mostly. More flyers and posters and stuff everywhere. And I think I just didn't want it to do all that detail, but I love the character of Frez. He's obviously someone that Jeff has known for a long time. He's older than Jeff. He's definitely somewhere in his, probably like in his mid to late 20s. And, you know, he's older, but he has a level of respect for Jeff. He knows Jeff. He's known Jeff since Jeff and his grandmother moved to the Red Castle, and you know, he was there when Jeff made the decision to be a slugger, and you know, he's talking about like, and this was my way of kind of explaining what was going on with the earliest stories and why you didn't see Jeff being a slugger, why you didn't see him going off on missions and doing stuff, and because there was a reason. Not only because that's not the story that I wanted to tell, that's just sort of Jeff's reason for being out in the world on his own. Really, is because he ran away and decided to be a slugger. But I mean, that's simply a, you know, sort of a story device. But it's not the story that I wanted to tell. The story that I wanted to tell is Jeff's life. And Jeff's life is not just being a slugger. Jeff's life is something bigger than he is even aware of, but is living through. And but I still wanted to explain to the readers why, even though I would talk about it from time to time, why he was never actually doing any jobs, you know, making any money. And this is the reason. Excuse me. It's just that I like this, the idea of this. Sorry. I'm actually recording this early in the morning, so my voice is just kind of, you know, you have that early groggy, you know, the Gimme Gang. Gimme Gang. It's just this conversation between Jeff and Frez, and it's meant to make really that connection that there's, you know, that this is where Jeff is from, and you know, it's really a really friendly, very relaxed conversation that the two are having. It's actually not like any conversation that Jeff has had with any other character up to this point. It's very joking and very, you know, very casual. And, you know, I mean, he's picking fun at Frez, and Frez is picking fun at him, and, you know, they're like very blunt with each other. And so, and this is, they're talking about the Okio. The Okio is the little book that actually keeps, it keeps all of it's sort of, well, I'll be honest, the best way to explain it is, it's like having a little, well, I guess, I mean, it's several things in one. It's like a phone, it's like a messaging device, you know, it's all these, it's kind of what a phone is nowadays. It's a multimedia device, you know, it's more than just a phone, you know, and so, but it's a book, you know, and the honest truth behind creating the Okio like this is, with a lot of my work, a lot of my different works, I want to distance myself from earthly and real world elements. Like I've never been a big fan of shows that date themselves. You know, they even though they're being really creative and stuff, they will have characters pick up a phone, and And in some stuff that I remember, they pick up like a rotary phone. Some stuff that I've looked at, they'll pick up a rotary phone, or even like a little a touch tone phone, or something like that. But it's a landline or something like that, and that immediately dates that that particular film or that book or whatever it is that is being viewed or read or whatever. It puts it in a specific time frame, unless it's supposed to be of that time. But I mean more so when they're sort of supposed to be sort of made up, and it's a fantastic sort of world. Not necessarily pure fantasy, but it's a fantastic sort of world. But then they'll have elements of the time that the creator was in, and that always bothered me. Even as as a little kid, it bothered me to see stuff like that happen, because it was like it pulled me out of the story, because suddenly I was like, well, that's not what stuff looks like now. That's what stuff looked like when they created this, and that's weird. I know there have been several shows. You see it a lot in I guess you can't really blame science fiction for trying. I mean, science fiction has always tried to predict the future, but some science fiction really dates itself, because you'll see them use they'll use floppy disk to boot up a computer, and then you look at the computer and the computer looks dated. Everything about it looks dated, and it's honestly just something I try to avoid. I try to avoid those kinds of things. And it took me a while to get to that point where I realized, just avoid that completely. And so the creation of the Okio is sort of walking around the idea of communication devices. There's no need for telephones, because they use logic in sort of a technological way. In this world, the Crimson King has actually, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this without being too convoluted. The Crimson King has essentially designated certain logic to be legal, but only it's sanctioned. It's only under specific regulation that it can be used in specific ways. Otherwise, it is deemed illegal and punishable by death. And so, one of the ways that this is used is it's in a very technological way, and so, it's used as like power sources and relay devices. It's very much like microchips and things like that. And in some instances, like amplifiers, like literally amplifiers, like speaker amplifiers and things like that. I said relay devices, like as in satellites, sending transmissions from one to another. I'll talk more about that a little bit later in a few issues. It'll pop up again. But so the Okio is definitely, it's a sanctioned device by the NSSA, which is the North-South Sluggers Association. I know it sounds silly, but hey, and it's really just a communication device. It's sort of like a texting device, and he can get his messages. He doesn't talk to people directly. Like you don't open it up and you hear a voice and you speak into it, but he can open it up and he will have received a message from someone. Like the pages will sort of have something written on it, and he can he can rip those pages out if he wants, or he can he can have it so that they wipe themselves clean. But he can use certain pens and he writes in them, and it will transmit. It will send what he wrote through logic. It'll send it to its destination, and it'll pop up in someone else's Okio that way. And I don't know. I mean, it's all just kind of magic, you know, in a way, but sort of taking a slightly technological slant to it. But it's all in an attempt to avoid dating the book. That way, it has sort of a, like 60 years from now, someone could read Goblin and still, just read right through it and not be fazed by any of the stuff that goes on in the story. None of the technology is relevant to their time. And none of it makes them walk away and go, wait a minute, nobody uses phones like that anymore, or nobody has cars like that. Cars, that's the kind of stuff that's always bothered me. It'll suck me right out of the story. And so I just needed to avoid that completely. I love that face that Jeff makes. He's just, But yeah, the little stamp that's in the front, it just kind of, for him, it flaked off, and that's why he wasn't receiving any messages. Otherwise, yes, the story would have had him slugging quite a bit. And it would have had him come to the Red Castle sooner, which means he probably wouldn't have met Amy. But that's not the story. So, and he just didn't take care of it. He didn't take care of his book, which is completely a Jeff thing. I mean, in the time that he was out there running and jumping and falling over stuff, the book was being damaged. And you're supposed to renew your stamp at no charge. You renew your stamp at no charge before it even gets to this state. If it gets to this state, yeah, it's going to cost you money to renew it. Because it's the ink is fairly expensive, and that's one of the ways that the Crimson King stays in control. If you want to use this technology, you're going to have to pay for it, and you're going to pay a lot for it. And it's just, I don't know, it's one more thing that makes Jeff hate what's going on, hates the Crimson King, hates that entire royal family, really. Is just the exploitation of something like this, something that normally would be very free, to the people. It's a very free thing. Anyone can do it. Anyone can learn logic, is the thing. And it's just a matter of, do you have a teacher? And in this time and era, finding someone to teach you, it's a little harder. And then general interest isn't in learning logic, when logic is a part of everyday life for most people, especially if you come from the city. It's just kind of everyday life, and you don't think about what it is, what it's from. People I guess it's a matter of people taking it for granted, but also not wanting to get too involved in it, because getting too involved in it and you're not supposed to be, you're not legally a part of that process, it's dangerous. It's a very dangerous thing, just that look. His cat eyes suddenly. Clearly, Frez and Jeff have, they've had this history where Jeff is, he's used his position as a logic smith and just being really, really good at really being a slugger. He's good at being a slugger, not necessarily at tracking, but being a slugger. He's been good at, and just helping guys like Frez with their local problems, and he's used that as leverage in order to get things for free. And so we're just kind of discussing that. But of course, again, Jeff uses it to get his way. And so Frez had his stamp actually stolen from his office, and Jeff's supposed to go off and go find it from a little local gang that you really can't call a gang, but you can. Even three people can be considered. Well, two people can be considered a gang. But it's really the Gimme Gang isn't a gang really. It's just a couple of people. So we go back here, and essentially, this is almost the same idea. It's like two different sides of the same concept. What the Rock Eater is doing here is the same thing that is being done when Frez uses the Okio stamp to stamp the inside of the book, the Okio. When he uses the stamp, it's the same thing that the Rock Eater is doing here, using this special ink that's, they go out and they find certain herbs and berries and different minerals that are smelted down and things like that, combined in certain ways, can gain similar results to using logic, because it's all goes hand in hand. It all goes hand in hand. It's manipulation of elements, manipulation of molecules, manipulation of atoms. All this stuff is universal, and so even though the two forms of logic are similar, they're just being used in different ways, but their relationship is a lot closer than your average person would think. And I mean, for one, the Okio stamp would be casting a spell. It's casting a spell, placing it on the book, and casting it. For holding, it's supposed to hold. When something is transmitted, it holds it, and it's sort of like a receiver. Whereas what the Rock Eater is doing here is breaking a spell. She's casting a spell in order to break it. It's she's casting it to break the binding that Sankofa is in. And apparently the incantation that was placed on him is fairly simple. And if Jeff had been just a little bit better, he could have broken it himself. But we know Jeff's situation. But it's an older art form, logic form, I guess is a good way of putting it. Doing this by hand like this, not a lot of logic smiths do this kind of thing nowadays. It's fallen out of fashion because it's very physically intensive, and it takes a lot of memorization of different incantations, because verbalizing an incantation has been reduced down to very small phrases, very small words. It's almost a shorthand when you're saying it, but this is the longhand when you have to, when you actually use like a quill or a brush and ink, and you have to you paint it out, you draw it out essentially in these sort of pictographic ways. It's a very longhand form, and so it's fallen out of fashion, I guess you could say, with most contemporary logic smiths. But some of there are some older ones that I'm sure have at least been taught this. Maybe don't use it, but have been taught the basics of this. And Rock Eater, obviously, knowing this, surely she's taught this to some other people, like maybe Radua, but more on that in a later issue. And this was just a regular sort of, it was just me kind of putting that sort of mundane sort of thing in the middle of a story that has the potential to be very, it's just very epic and adventurous and stuff like that. And it's just something as casual and as mundane as forgetting to take off your jacket. When you come home, you get so sidetracked with something, and you forget to take off your jacket, or or your shoes or something like that, and you realize like an hour or so in, oh man, I didn't take off my jacket, and then suddenly you take off your jacket, and it's just like, wow, I can't believe I was that into it. And that's all this was. And she knocks over some of the ink, and this was also a plot device to change Amy's outfit. I decided a while back, prior to this, that I was going to. I was tired of this very bland outfit that Amy wore. I kind of like it for what it is, but it represents an older conceptualization of the Amy character. Actually, it represents the version of Amy just before the issue 1 of this series. The original issue 1 that I created, Amy was a blank slate. Like, I decided to make her an amnesia victim. She was amnesiac, I guess is the word. I think that's the word. And it didn't work. I didn't like that. She was a blank slate and everything was new to her. And I was just like, I don't know, I'm not sure exactly what made me turn her into that character when she was a character filled with knowledge prior to that. In every other instance before that, she was this character filled with knowledge. She didn't know everything about everything, but she wasn't an innocent, blank slate, amnesia character where I would write stuff and add to her as I went. And so when I made her that, I gave her an outfit that sort of reflected that. And so she just had this gray outfit. And when I changed her and gave her back her personality, I kept the outfit because I had grown attached to it. I had already grown very attached to that outfit. And I figured it kind of worked in that idea that I have of what's on the outside obviously doesn't reflect what's on the inside. I mean, I know this is something that everyone says, but it is a truth. What you see on the outside does not truly reflect what's on the inside, or what a person is about. Because a person will dress a specific way doesn't necessarily mean 100% truth about their personality, or what their personality will be. And so I decided to keep Amy in this outfit because it didn't have it was sort of an opposite. It was contrasting to her personality. She's sort of outgoing, a little bubbly, very inquisitive, very she's curious, and she asks questions all the time, and she's into everything, and she just absorbs knowledge. And just absorbs, just everything. And her outfit doesn't really reflect that. Her outfit reflects kind of an empty sort of vessel. And not necessarily for absorbing knowledge or having knowledge or anything. Just kind of boring, bland. And it was just a matter of I had grown attached to it, but then I thought, oh well, this makes it so that when you look at her, you don't automatically go, okay, I know what she's about, and that's I kind of like doing that. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it before, subverting expectations, subverting anyone's ideas of what anything is about in any of my stories, but especially this one. These characters are I want them to be always, not always a surprise, but constantly surprising people with some of the things that they do and they say and that they're about. Because that's the nature of life. Life is not predictable. There are some aspects of life that repeat and are very similar from person to person and time period to time period, from place to place. But overall, life is always new, it's always changing, always evolving. There's always something unpredictable about it. And I don't know, personally I find that exciting. I find that exciting about life. And this is a good way of kind of replicating it, but also just a way of, just transitioning, just making a transition for this character and giving her a little bit more of herself, that character that is Amy, and by her outfit change, giving her some of her actual personality in her outfit. Yeah, I just love the way she's just kind of like, like a little stress headache there, oh, jeez. Just annoyed at the whole situation, really, and just tired. I mean, her day is very long. The Rock Eater's normal day is very, very long, very filled. She's always doing stuff for people all over the Red Castle, fixing things and making repairs, just doing stuff for people. Treating people, and then also protecting people as well. She acts as one of the law officials there. And it's very tiring, very stressful. It makes for a long day. I love this face that Amy is making. She really looks like a child in contrast to the Rock Eater, with that face that she's making. It's very childlike, and I was just happy with the way that came out in the end. Again, just kind of easing the tensions of everything. The whole situation with Sankofa and the Rock Eater, and what's possibly going on here. There's a layer of tension there, and I'm just kind of easing it, by just being silly, and kids wearing adult clothes has always kind of been funny to me. Even though I wouldn't consider Amy a kid too much at 16. She's not a little kid in that sense, but clearly the Rock Eater is bigger in size. She's a much older adult, and she's taller and definitely wider than Amy is. Amy is she's very tiny. She's a little, she's lanky and stuff, and it shows, in this outfit. And we go back to these guys who I mentioned serve as just kind of a sort of a plot device, a reason to move the story along. And this is one of the things I mean. They're talking about things. The characters they're sort of filling the reader in on some other things about this world that we're now in the Red Castle, and they're talking about like the Rock Eater and maybe the role that she plays in this, and that there may be something else about her that keeps people from crossing her. There's something about her, and that we'll touch on more in future issues. And of course, this is where what I was talking about earlier. I believe in the last commentary where you can report people to the the EOS. You report them and you can get money, but clearly these guys, even though they know they could make good money by reporting a logicsmith to the EOS, the idea of even being in league with the Empire Sands, the Crimson Army, or any association with the Empire of Sands really is just offensive. It's offensive because these people have been displaced because of the war that the Crimson King and the Empire of Sands has subjected the entire continent to. They have no home. They're in the predicament that they're in mostly because of that. They've lost their home and possibly lost their families. They've lost all their personal possessions and things like that. They've had to rebuild and are having a hard time rebuilding because of that. And so even if you could make a lot of money, it's just, it's offensive. Just the idea of it is offensive. And it's just an interesting sort of look into these characters who, they're bandits, but clearly they have a line that they won't cross. Even they have a line that they won't cross. And that plays right into that idea of what is good and what is bad, what is truly bad. And it's all relative. It's all really relative to that person. Like, these guys, they know being bandits is wrong, but it's a way that they see to make money or make a living or get out of the predicament that they're in. And they know it's wrong, and especially lawfully it's wrong in the area that they're in to prey on other people. But they don't see it as bad as I guess murdering someone for no reason. Like killing someone. Like if they killed someone in the name of self-defense, does that make you a bad person? Versus someone who kills for the thrill. Which we would all probably agree, yeah, probably, yeah, that's kind of bad. I mean, it's morally seems wrong. But with these guys, it's just like what they do. I mean, they're not necessarily killers, but they're bandits, and so maybe there has been a period of time when they had to kill someone. Who knows? But it was in the name of survival for them. And so it's like, to them it's not necessarily bad, but to someone else it's bad. And so it's all relative and it's all subjective, to the nature of the situation. And that's what I'm playing with, but clearly they see themselves as not bad in contrast to the Crimson King, who outright just kills people for the sake of killing and the sake of his own gain, his own personal gain and his own personal satisfaction. He wipes out entire villages, towns, etc. It just the list goes on and on, the things that he's done, or not even just him, but his father, his father's father, and so on, back to the first Crimson King. And so they don't see themselves as bad when placed side by side with the Crimson King, but someone else could see them as bad, and it's just kind of an interesting way of playing around with that idea. And I just like that they were looking for this gun that was dropped earlier. It's like, clearly, having guns it's rare. It's rare to have a gun as a regular person, especially in this area where people are very poverty stricken. To have a high caliber gun, like this is rare. It's not even a pistol; it's more of a rifle. So it's a prized possession, and you don't just if it falls into the river, you go after it. You break it down and clean it and hope that it works afterwards. And I think it's funny, I don't know, to me it's funny. So here comes our transition further into the story. These guys usher in, our two characters, our two bandits here, really usher in the antagonist of the story. And I just wanted to, like in their little discussion here, cue them in on what was going on. Like, they're talking about the flag that's flying and the tarp, and that this is something, the fabrics that these are actually made of are, visually they could tell right away those were expensive fabrics, and it's not something seen normally by your average person at the Red Castle. I mean, the Red Castle, this is, like I said, is a poverty-stricken area. I mean, people are living in shanty towns like a few hundred feet away from where these guys are. And so for someone to ride in and they have they're displaying these fabrics is sort of a sign of a specific status. Not necessarily really being wealthy in these guys' eyes. Yes, they're probably rich kids, you know, because well, they can see that they're kids. We can't see that they're kids, but these two guys can see the people in the boat are kids. And you know, well, to them they're kids. These are, you know, very grown men, probably in somewhere in their 40s, I believe these guys are. But those fabrics are uncommon to the area. It means that they had money to have those fabrics and to just display them this way, you know, means that someone there must have money, and that means quite possibly an opportunity to make money. So they kind of just go back to, you know, being bandits, and I really like this picture of him just kind of stopping the boat's movement with his foot. And in the water at this point, the boat, you know, was probably just kind of sailing along. It wasn't actually being propelled by a motor or anything. It was probably just floating down river, because the river actually cuts through the interior, the bottom interior of the Red Castle. It goes in one side and out the other. The river actually flows through the Red Castle. It doesn't stop inside. It actually flows through. So the water it'll take you through. You don't have to use a motor unless you need to get somewhere quickly. But in this case, you know, they don't care. I love the look on that one guy's face. The guy on the left, he's so pleased with himself, and the idea of just making some money or something. And another way, honestly, another way of kind of playing up the idea that this particular fabric that they were using is not rare to the area is if you kind of go through, and you look at a lot of the fabric colors, the colors of the clothing that I used a lot of sort of muted colors for a lot of the characters, a lot of sort of bland sort of greens and browns and grays and things like that, you know, just all sort of muted colors and not vibrant. And then when you look at like the Rock Eater wears vibrant colors, but the Rock Eater is not wealthy, but she has traveled the world and has actually gone and bought these over time. You know, she's collected articles of clothing over time that she liked, that are more lavish in comparison to average citizens in the Red Castle, and so, you know, I mean, you can just kind of see it, you know, as you look through some of the pages in the different books where you see people, yeah. I mean, even these guys, their clothes, you know, this is like the true introduction of our antagonist here, 26, Sune, and Sethire. And they just seem like trouble. They instantly seem like trouble. And they're so blasé about everything, you know, the fact that they're under siege, you know, it's such a, you know, they're you know, clearly these guys are no threat, and it's just so interesting. And it's the characters of 26 and Sune were created a long time ago. They were created somewhere in the middle transition of Goblin, when I merged the character of Jeff and Amy into one character, and it was a girl. At that point is when I created the characters of Sune and 26. Sethire actually didn't exist until I came to this version of Goblin. And she was just kind of filling out the group. And their original purpose was not much different, but definitely a little bit different. And they are, I can be 100% honest here. They're actually based on alternate universe versions of two characters that appear in a different series that I plan on eventually going back to. I used to self-publish it before Goblin, and I plan on eventually, I cross my fingers on it, but I plan on eventually animating it myself, doing an animated series version of it. And they're actually just alternate sort of like versions of those characters. And if you ever saw those characters, you would say, okay, yeah, I can kind of see it. But they they gain their own personalities over time. And I just thought it was interesting what they turned out to be, how they turned out in the end. And his glowing eyes, sort of this weird ghost fire burning going on there. And then we cut to the mech being worked on by this guy, and you can see where these guys are kind of where they normally hang out at. They have their little tent and stuff. They don't actually stay up in the shanty town. They hang out down here in the lower half of Gutstown near the base pillars. And there are probably other people out there too that camp out in these areas, not for the same reasons that these guys do, but because maybe not everyone wants to live in the same place, and some people are just passing through. It's sort of a refuge, it's a place for people to stop, and you can stay or pass through, but it's free of charge. It's completely free of charge. This society is, you can come and you can stay, you build your home, and you can stay there, and you can contribute to the society or you don't. But most people contribute to the society that they've created, and they barter and all things like, and all sorts of things like that. There are different types of people there. Merchants of all different sorts have ended up here, and it's just kind of an interesting little society that's a little community that's been created. I just like this scene of him hanging out of the mech, kind of fixing something right in there, and he fixed the arm and stuff, and this voice off in the distance. I like the subtlety of the fact that his foot is standing on the shoulder of the mech. His foot is placed on the shoulder to make sure that he doesn't slip off the surface of it when he turned. And then oh my goodness, transition already. That was weird. Our last shot. All three of them, Sune, 26, and Sethire. Not their best depiction, but oh well. I had to get used to the characters after so much time. It had been so long since I had drawn them regularly that I was completely out of practice drawing them. And Sethire, I had not really drawn a lot at all after her initial creation.
But yeah, clearly they're looking for something, and we can only suspect what. But so yeah, that is Goblin 8B, and the first chapter, the first chapter, I guess you could say, of the Red Castle story arc. So I guess hopefully join me on 9 through 12 and where I'll talk a little bit more in depth about other things that are going on in the story, other elements, other things, behind the scenes. And thank you for reading Goblin. Hopefully you enjoyed Goblin and this commentary. Bye.